You're listening to the Control System Integrators Association's Talking Industrial Automation podcast, where you get to know the people that make modern manufacturing and processing possible. Now, here's your host, Tony Veroven.
Thanks for downloading the Talking Industrial Automation podcast. This is a show to help you get to know the people that make modern manufacturing and processing possible. I'll be talking industrial automation with CSIA system integrators and industry partners to get a better understanding of how they help their clients solve manufacturing and process challenges, and how they became successful in their careers. Along the way, we will touch on system integration best practices, technology, trends, and challenges. Whether you are a manufacturer, end user, supplier, or system integrator, I hope you will enjoy the insights CSIA members will bring to this podcast. In this episode of Talking Industrial Automation, I spoke with PC Romano of Avid Solutions. You're going to learn the unique things he's doing to develop skilled engineers for his company, how he approaches a project and the unique things he does to make sure that a project goes well, and what are some of the things that prospective clients can do to ensure a good relationship with their system integrator. Enjoy getting to know PC Romano of Avid Solutions. Hi, it's Tony Veroven with CSIA, and we're talking industrial automation with PC Romano of Avid Solutions. Hi, PC.
Hey, Tony. Good to see you again.
Good to see you. Look, we'll see you in a couple of months in San Francisco at the conference.
Absolutely. Never miss one.
Very good. Very good. Well, I thank you so much for taking some time to sit down with me here. And just wanted to sit down and chat and have you maybe tell your story a little bit, how you got here. And, we hope that people out there, prospective employees that might want to come work for Avid, or prospective customers maybe get to know you a little better. So that's kind of the purpose of this talk today.
Yeah, it sounds great. I'm looking forward to it.
Excellent. Well, let's jump right in here. You were the former chair of the CSIA. We'll get to that, but tell me a little bit kind of how you got here today. How you're the head of a large company that does great system integration work.
Yeah, well, so I kind of got here in a strange way, I guess, and maybe most of us did, but I always envisioned working with a large Fortune 500 manufacturer in manufacturing and going into management, operations management. But in 1996, my father-in-law had this smaller company that was doing some system integration here in North Carolina. And he convinced my wife and I to move from Motorola in Chicago and join the family business as engineers. And we did just that. She started having kids and stayed home soon after that. But I got into project management, engineering management. And just 5 years after that, he passed away suddenly, and I took over the company. And if you remember 2001, the country was going into a recession. It was a difficult time. But I knew that I needed help. I guess I was young enough to know that I needed help. And I began reaching out to different people and organizations. CSIA had been one that I had heard a lot about, but I never made time to attend the conference. And so in April 2002, I attended my first conference. And it was great. I got to meet a lot of people. I got to learn from more experienced folks. And someone recommended along the way that I get involved in committees. So that's really when I kind of stepped up my involvement. And I was involved in the Best Practices Committee, and we were working on a new version at the time. And that was beneficial for me also, because Best Practices is about building a better system integration company. And we had a whole long way to go to get better. And so I was meeting people, but also I was learning a lot in the process. At the time, we would hole up in a conference room for a couple days to really churn out a lot of these best practice pieces. And shortly after that, Norm O'Leary gave me a call. So some of you may remember Norm. He was our executive director for many years and really was successful building CSIA. And he asked if I'd consider being on the board of directors. And I was still extremely busy with the business, but I decided to make time for that. And it was another good choice for me. Got to meet people at a different level, got to help with CSIA's direction. And after a few years, I was nominated to become chairman. So I did that, did my term, and they put me out to pasture a few years ago, but I certainly stay in touch with the folks.
Excellent. Excellent. So let's talk a little bit about maybe how CSI and the best practices helped you improve your company. What about the best practices helped you improve your company, or maybe, or talk a little bit maybe at a high level of what could have been improved at your company? Obviously, you're successful, had been around for a while. Doesn't mean you were failing, but what was something about the best practices that you're like, oh boy, this really helps me bolster some of my processes?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So people think about the best practices and certification together, and I think that you don't have to. I think there's benefits to both. In our case, we went straight toward certification, and so maybe we leaned in pretty hard. But in that process, it forces you to take a look at yourself, and some healthy kind of questions are asked. One thing I've learned over the years is, our industry is fairly young, and a lot of these companies are fairly young and figuring things out. And usually it's a pretty predictable path where they'll figure out the technical, they'll figure out how to sell projects. They got to do that pretty early. The project management comes a little later. And in our case, that was one that the best practices and certification helped move forward. But then on companies' journeys, things like marketing and human resources tend to be one of the last ones that mature. And I think, again, through the certification process and using the best practices, we continue to ask ourselves the right questions. And today I'm really proud of where we've come in both of those areas. Especially in human resources, I think we're doing some really unique and innovative stuff for the industry.
Excellent. Yeah, and that's a good point. Obviously, we think about all of the engineering, the processes, improving your business. But when you dig in a little bit, the people are obviously your biggest asset, right? And so, what are, maybe without giving away too much, but what are some of the things maybe you're doing to take care of your people so that obviously they're sticking around, and because we know that engineers are hard to find. Good engineers are hard to find.
Absolutely. In fact, I think most system integrators would say that that's one of their top, if not their top constraints to growth, is finding great engineers. I remember I was at a CSIA conference, in fact, watching a speaker, and that I wrote down, I said, we need to get an HR manager. At that point, we didn't have one. We had accounting folks taking care of the administrative. I was the chief recruiter at the time when we were much smaller. And within a few months, we hired a part-time HR manager who went to full-time, and now she has a team working for her. The two, I would say, the two things that we think are very innovative about what we've done is created something called Avid University, which is our go-to place for any kind of training our folks need, whether it's technical or industry-specific training, or even communication, business, leadership, safety, and wellness. But then we also created what we call the Avid Growth Map, which is a career path for our engineers, and it allows them to choose focus either on technical or project management or client management or a combination of those. And that's pretty important. I think most people in our industry know that oftentimes people will wear multiple hats, and sometimes those hats don't always fit as well. And so it really is self-directed career path where people can progress and choose from the different areas. And we have that mirrored, connected with Avid University. So they know what training they need to get, they know what experiences they need to have and demonstrate to move to the next level. So we've actually shared that with some CSIA members. I'm in a peer group, and when we were hosting, we shared some of that, and they've adopted some of the same things. And so today, we hire both new graduates from some top universities, as well as some experienced people. So we manage that balance closely. But in both cases, we've been really successful in the last few years, and hiring people hasn't been a constraint for us, which is great. One thing that our people tell me, our HR people, is we're increasingly known in industry as we've grown. And in some ways, I think people see us as a career destination. I think, examples like those I just mentioned tend to make it a good place for people to work. And so that helps as well.
Great. So it sounds like obviously with your Avid University, you're developing people that come in. So you're not looking necessarily for the holy grail of engineers. They don't have to have necessarily all the skills that maybe they need to be successful at your company. So, which is good because there probably isn't a perfect employee from a skill set, I would imagine, right?
Yeah, that's right. In fact, with new graduates, they come in needing to learn almost everything. And so we have a special course. It's a 2-week course that's broken into 2 separate weeks, where we teach them the business as well as the technical side. They actually go and do a project and incorporate that in real physical equipment. And so that kind of gets them kicked off quickly. With experienced engineers, it tends to more be kind of point requirements. Either they want to move up and they want to, for example, develop their project management skills, or else it may be a new technology. Maybe they know one DCS and they need to learn another one. So yeah, it depends a lot on where they are in their career, but also what they're trying to do in their career.
What would you tell maybe someone who's in college right now or is thinking about getting into control systems and automation? Or what would you tell someone who is not even thinking about control system automation? Maybe they haven't even maybe they don't even know that exists yet, but they have a penchant for electrical engineering. What sort of things would you tell them to do to prepare for a career in this? What sort of skills should they need?
Yeah, good question. First of all, we hire 4 different disciplines. So electrical, mechanical, chemical engineers, and computer science or computer engineering. And so we don't expect any of our people to know all of the aspects of our business. And so I think, starting where their interests are and selecting a major is great, as long as it's in one of those technical fields. But probably the biggest advice I would give is go out there, do an internship, do a co-op, get to know what it's like, either at a system integration company or in a plant. And most of the people who do that, I think, do fall in love with the manufacturing and the technology that drives it. This isn't system integration like it was 20 or 30 years ago. We're starting to do things with data science and machine learning that's pretty exciting and also excites a different set of people.
Very good. I just thought of a kind of funny story about how this industry is either what it is exactly or it's way over your head. And before I started with CSIA, this probably would have been like, what is this? Yesterday, I went on a field trip with my son with a ski trip, and I get on the lift and I look over to the right, and this guy is talking about how he's taking a day off. He's from a large food manufacturer, and he's talking about he does industrial automation. And I'm like, hey, I know who you are. I know what you guys do. I work for CSIA. So it was kind of interesting with regards to those things and that out there, and people are doing that kind of work. And so kind of tying back to, an integrator or a future integrator who may not even realize that this exists yet.
Yeah, it's a very large industry, but it's not very well known. And so I've got my elevator speech that I give to people who don't know anything about our industry. But basically, you used to have 6 or 8 guys running around a chemical plant, turning valves, starting motors, reading temperatures and pressures. And today you might have a single operator in an air-conditioned control room with 6 or 8 screens in front of him. And he's just really managing exceptions. I think that helps. I'm not sure. That's the way I explained it, though.
Yeah, well, and that, in fact, that's actually a question I usually ask in these talks are, how do you describe what you do to lay people?
Mhm. Yeah, and so the other thing I say about it is we basically design and program the systems that go all the way from that pump or valve in the physical world all the way through that operator station and the software and the computers that operator is using, and then above that into the server side and even cloud. So it's another perspective on it, and maybe it helps a little bit.
Very good. Well, let's dig into your business a little bit here. What about Avid is very unique, especially how you approach a problem or a challenge or a specific project?
Yeah, good question. I've had the luck of being able to meet a number of system integrators. I mentioned I'm in a peer group. I'm involved with CSIA, and so I've visited a lot of system integrators and understand kind of their similarities and then their big differences. I mentioned human resources and Avid University and Avid Growth Map. I think that is one difference for us. Another important one has to do with our roots. We were started as a technician services company in the process industries. And so our technicians would install and calibrate instruments in process industries. Although we don't do that anymore, that's continued as far as our focus, our vertical industry focused. So one thing we do is we select 5 industries that we focus on. Some system integrators do more, some do less. We've decided that number is a good one for us, but they all have process in common. So life sciences, chemicals, power generation, pulp and paper, food and bev, and CPG are the ones we focus on. And having a relatively small number of those with a relatively large number of people, we can have our people specialize and develop deep domain expertise in one of those industries. I remember when I joined the industry some 20 years ago, if you could program a PLC-5, you could go, from a bakery to a rock quarry to a car manufacturer, and you would be providing a lot of value. Today, it's very different. Today, the tools are more widely known, in some cases easier to use. And so that industry knowledge, that domain expertise is what the clients really want you to have to create the value. And so to me, what is that? There are the physical and chemical processes that we need to understand. So not just the controls, but what is the process they're trying to control? What's a chemical process? And then there's business processes and drivers. What are they trying to accomplish from a business standpoint? What are their priorities? And so we use technology to address all that, but knowing technology alone is not enough. So to answer your question, we do spend more time developing our people with industry-specific knowledge, as well as hiring experienced people who have that deep knowledge. And that's what our customers value about us.
Right. So with regards to project management experience or project, I guess, approaching a customer with your project management, I guess let's call it infrastructure. Does that feel different for the customer compared to maybe other integrators they've used or other engineering companies they've used?
Interesting question. And so the process experience and background allows us to add more value. How we execute the projects has changed over the years too. And this is common among a lot of system integrators, not all, but a lot of us have gone from strictly what's called a waterfall type of project management or model for a project to something that looks like Agile or Scrum. What we've done in particular is create our methodologies to allow for either one. Because we have certain industries, for example, life sciences, that follows more the V model, the waterfall. And then we have others like chemical, where Agile works better. So we allow our project managers to choose either philosophy.
That's interesting. I hadn't heard that. I guess everything I hear in the industry, not even just in system integration, but any kind of software development, is that waterfall is old and bad and Agile is new and great. So that's interesting that you've not totally abandoned waterfall, and it's maybe more appropriate in certain situations.
Yeah, we've noticed in the regulated industries, it's expected and required more often. Yeah.
Excellent. What are some of the technical challenges maybe that you've seen recently in approaching a project? Is there some sort of trend that you're seeing in working with clients' needs?
Mm. Yeah, so our tools and technologies and systems keep getting more complex and sophisticated, and that's the primary reason I think that in the last 20 years, our manufacturing clients have stopped actually doing the projects as much, and companies like Avid have grown to take that work. That pace is continuing to accelerate, and so what does it mean for us? It means our people are needing to learn new skills, new technologies at a faster pace. They also need to increasingly deal with interoperability. When we think about all the different components, multi-vendor systems that we work on, the number of components that need to work together keeps growing, but also managing the updates and the patches and the versions on each one, something we call configuration management, becomes increasingly important. So managing configurations, managing the multi-vendor technologies is a big deal.
Great. So what are some of the things with regards to cybersecurity that maybe you want to make sure that your clients know? So as far as like, why is cybersecurity such an issue? Why is industrial security such a problem these days? You keep hearing in the news about this plant got hacked or this virus is out there. What are some of the observations that you have about those?
Yeah, it has been an interesting time. First of all, because 3 or 4 years ago, the system integrator community was wondering, why aren't our clients getting this? We know it's an issue, but we're not really getting a whole lot of attention, not a whole lot of traction. And it only took a few instances of ransomware, I think, to really change that. Once it got into the news, it got to the board level conversations, and it started becoming real. In fact, we were engaged with a major pharmaceutical company to start doing a study and a standardization of their automation assets and software, in part to help beef up their cybersecurity. But that all stalled when they were hit by a major ransomware attack, and all the priorities and resources jumped onto that. But I think, to answer your question directly, I think for a long time there was kind of a blind eye as far as the IT equipment and networks that exist on the plant floor. I think, as you know, the corporate IT folks didn't tend to go down onto the plant floor, and the plant engineers maybe didn't have the same IT background or experience or expectations. In fact, in a lot of cases, they maybe didn't really realize all the things they had connected to a network. And so now that's starting to come to light. Our clients are talking to us increasingly about helping them with that. And I see us doing that not only as a project, but managing that for them on a continuous basis, us really providing managed services to do things like log aggregation, managing patches and updates, compatibility between versions, all of those kind of things.
What are some of the skills that maybe you find in your own career that you've developed? Obviously, to be successful here, we talked a little bit about the technical proficiencies, but are there other soft skills or other skills that you rely on or that you've developed?
That's a good question. As the system integrators have grown, they tend to promote engineers into management positions. And sometimes that works well, sometimes it doesn't work as well. But what is required is that person needs to shift in his personal development. So I was an engineer, but I haven't programmed a PLC in over 15 years. And so certainly my focus is on leadership skills, strategy, communication, etc. So yeah, as a company grows from 10 to 50 to 150 people, those skills of the leaders really needs to shift.
Absolutely. What are some of the things that you are doing to do that? Would you point back to your Avid University? Is that kind of accounted for as well?
Yeah. So from a personal standpoint, I did an MBA early on. I don't know whether I would recommend that to people today. And there are a few reasons for that, but the primary one is I think that if someone's interested in developing their management leadership skills, there's more focus, more strategic approaches to personal development than just, getting a standard MBA. And so I think it really should be personalized. I think it really should take into account, the person's objectives and where they're starting from. So I think that would be one comment. Another thing is, in addition to my peer group in CSIA, I also belong to a CEO peer group called Vistage. I know there's several other members of CSIA that have joined that. But in my case, that was a big personal development journey. It benefited me a lot. So I've been in Vistage for about 12 years now.
Very good. Very good. Thanks. So let's back up now, PC, a little bit. Where were you born? Where did you go to school? Tell me how did you get from a young lad to, maybe up through getting into college and taking over this business?
Yeah. And so my father's Italian, my mother's American. And growing up, my father got known for taking operations management roles in plants that had problems. And I guess maybe because he was Italian, they thought that, sending us to Brazil wouldn't be that big a deal. So when we were 7, we moved to Brazil for 6 years. It was supposed to be a 2-year assignment. And after that, he continued to take overseas assignments. So we lived all over the U.S., Mexico, and Brazil. I went off to the University of Michigan to study electrical engineering. And I remember at the time, I wanted to do exactly the same thing my dad was doing. So operations management, get an engineering degree, get an MBA, and go work for a company like Motorola, which is what I did until my father-in-law came calling.
Very good. Very good. So did you, let's say, you're teenage guy, what were some of the things that you did to maybe foster, or did you do something to foster, or did your dad foster kind of these things that kind of got you into engineering?
Yeah. So I think part of it was, just the things like science and math and engineering came more easily to me than some other things, like creative writing. But once I got into engineering school and started talking to companies about internships and co-ops, that's when it kind of solidified in my mind. I wanted to use technology in manufacturing. I did an internship with Ford Motor Company, and then I did 2 co-op semesters with a telecom company in Research Triangle Park, which is where I am today, as a matter of fact. But the added benefit of all that, first of all, I started figuring out, I want to do this, and I want to do it in this kind of industry, in this kind of setting. But then there was a secondary benefit in that I met my wife, who was a co-op at the time as well. So.
Oh, very good. So you met kind of on the same track a little bit.
That's right. Yeah.
Very good. So, PC, do you consider yourself? First of all, how large is your business?
So we have 125 people with 4 offices. We have 3 in the Southeast U.S. and then 1 in Brazil.
Okay. Do you still consider yourself an entrepreneur? Or do you consider yourself an entrepreneur still?
I guess I wouldn't use that term as much. When I think of entrepreneurs, I think of people who start businesses. And I didn't start this business, and I've been in charge of growing this business and making it successful. So I think of myself more as a manager. At the same time, innovation is becoming increasingly important, I think, in industry, but certainly within our company. And so innovation is a big part of what we do, even if we're not starting separate businesses. And one example, we created a platform to help our engineers automate the work that they do. And so we took a lot of learnings from other platforms and read a book called Platform Revolution, for example, and then ended up going out and finding little pieces of technology or microservices, third-party, sometimes open source pieces. And we brought them all together into a platform that allows our engineers to, for example, convert spreadsheets into PLC code, to take information from customers and develop, either AutoCAD drawings or documents. And a lot of system integrators have done that. In our case, we did it from a platform standpoint using third-party components some of which were developed by IBM. We have GitHub and some others built into this. But we also envision this as a platform that we might share with the broader system integration community. And then if one guy builds this great little widget to use on one project, maybe he could share that with someone else who could reuse that kind of thing. So that platform is just an example of some of the things we're doing around innovation to try to just continue to get better and stay ahead.
That's great. You mentioned kind of maybe sharing this out with the community. Talk a little bit about, I guess, the congeniality of system integrators, especially under the umbrella of CSIA. I mean, I'm sure you have a lot of competitors. I know we have a lot of members in North Carolina, in your area of the country. So you're still competitors, and obviously you have to run your business. But it also seems like a lot of integrators will work with one another, or at least kind of have that congeniality with one another with sharing information.
Yeah, that's probably the most unique thing about CSIA. And although I never met Charlie Bergman, and I was not one of the founders of CSIA in the 90s, I believe it all started then. The culture was one where these guys came together almost like a peer group to try to figure things out. And when people visit the conference for the first time, they're always surprised how much sharing, how much openness and transparency and congeniality, to your point, happens. It doesn't happen, I don't think, in other industries as much, in other countries as much, outside of CSIA. So it's something very special as we've gone from 15 members to 500 members today. It's remained. And then things like peer groups spin off of that. So today, CSIA has about 5 peer groups operating within it. And for example, the folks in my peer group, we get together face-to-face for a day and a half every 3 months. We share all our metrics. We share our problems and solutions. We go out and have dinner. And then ultimately, we share resources. And so even though we compete with some of these people sometimes, we also do projects together with them. So that ability to compete, but also share and help is really special and part of CSI.
I agree. Thinking about the end users or the clients, these manufacturers out there that might be watching this right now or listening to this, what sort of advice, how do they become a good prospective customer? Meaning, what kind of advice would you give them, and how do they research a good system integration company? What kind of questions should they ask? How should they be best prepared to bring a project to a system integrator?
Yeah, great question. A lot of things go through my mind. I guess, first of all, some people compare the control system to the brain of the factory. And so, if something happens to the brain, everything stops. And so to make sure that they're putting the proper perspective and value around the systems that we end up delivering, I think is a starting point. I think a next point is really understanding their core values and their culture and finding a company that matches that. In our case, trust is one of our 5 core values. And so we work best with a customer that we can build trust with. And so we actually have a program called the Trusted Partner Program, where there are special benefits and attention and things when we really build that relationship with that client. And we're able to create more value as we do that because they're sharing more about their expectations, their problems, their opportunities, and we're able to help them with those. So I think those are 2 kind of the softer aspects that I would keep in mind. I think another is one I mentioned earlier, and that's deep domain expertise. And the other one that comes to mind is a customer not only should trust the system integrator and make sure they find one they trust, but also find one that can help them, can advise them, can coach them in some ways. The more coachable we find our customers, the more value we can create and the better we can make them run. And that's our tagline, is run better. We help our clients run better. And there's a lot of ways we do that, but they need to be open and willing for us to help them down that path.
Right. Help me, help you, as an old movie said one day. So as we're wrapping up, PC, I appreciate your time here. Let's look at, now you're still a young man, but what would you tell your younger self? What kind of advice would you give him?
Oh, wow. I guess the way I think about it, of the 100 things I've done over the last 20 years, I probably got 51 right and 49 wrong. So as long as that ratio stays a little bit tilted toward the right, I think you're good. Looking back, there's certainly a lot of things we would have done differently. I think that, getting involved with CSIA when we did was great. If we had done that earlier, we would have benefited more. And even in a broader sense, getting outside of the business, outside even of our industry, to learn from others. We're a relatively young industry, and there are other industries that have already figured out some of the things that we deal with. And so that would probably be my biggest thing. I think we did that well, but the more that you can do that and the earlier you do that, you're better off.
Very good. PC Romano, Avid Solutions, thanks so much.
Thank you, Tony. Good to see you.
If you enjoy the podcast, please subscribe in iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, or wherever you listen to podcasts. We'd also appreciate a like, share, and comments about what you hear. Visit csiaexchange.com/podcast for a full list of episodes, to subscribe, or to contact us. We'd like to hear what topics you want to learn about and who you'd like to hear from. Music provided by bensound.com under a Creative Commons license. This is a production of the Control System Integrators Association, CSIA.
Thanks for listening to the Talking Industrial Automation podcast. Read the Industrial Automation blog and find and research qualified system integrators at csiaexchange.com. For more information on why your system integrator should be CSIA certified, visit controlsys.org, controlsys.org.